In case you didn't know, education is a basic right. It plays a vital role in building a sustainable society by paving the way for human accomplishment, progress, empowerment, and advancement. Well, today we celebrate the International Day of Education, which is observed across the globe to highlight the significance of education and show worldwide commitment to providing free and fair education opportunities for one and for all. Every year on January 24, the United Nations observes the International Day of Education, underscoring education as a basic human right and a public responsibility. Now this year, UNESCO is dedicating this day to the crucial role education and teachers play in countering hate speech, which is a phenomenon that has ballooned in recent years with the use of social media, damaging the fabric of our societies with the theme, Learning for Lasting Peace. Now in the African space, on January 2nd, 2024, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed signed a deal with Somaliland that would give Ethiopia direct access to the strategic port of Berbera through the Red Sea. Then Somalia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs slammed the agreement, saying that there is no space for mediation with Ethiopia unless it retracts an illegal memorandum of understanding which was signed by Somaliland. Now, at the core of the current debate surrounding the recent memorandum of understanding between Ethiopia and Somaliland lie three major interests. The first one, Somalia's unity, its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Secondly, Somaliland's pursuit of legal recognition of its existing independence and sovereignty. And do note that Somaliland is actually a region of Somalia that broke away in 1991 after a bloody war. And thirdly, Ethiopia's renewed long-standing aspiration to regain access to the sea. Now, the big question is, what makes this deal with Ethiopia any different? I am Dashen Usman, and this is Village Square Africa. And now to the headline stories across the continent. We have Lekan Onabanjo. Hi, Lekan. What's happening in the continent today?
Yes, good afternoon to you. I'll take you through it. Let's start by telling you that the governor of Ondo State, Lucky Ayedatiwa, has dissolved the State Executive Council. The governor also relieved all senior special assistants and special assistants of their duties. In a statement by his Chief Press Secretary, Ebenezer Adenio, on Wednesday, the governor said that the development would take immediate effect. The deputy governor made a directive that all members of the cabinet are to immediately hand over to the permanent secretaries or the most senior administrative officers in their respective offices. All the affected officials are directed to hand over all government properties in their possession. The governor thanked the affected officials for their services and contributions to the development of the state. And also, I will tell you that the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has arraigned former governor of Anambra State, Billy Obiano, on 9 counts of alleged 4 billion naira fraud during his time as governor of the Southeast states from March 2014 to March 2022. The 68-year-old was arraigned on Wednesday before Justice Inyang Ekwo of the Federal High Court in Abuja. Obiano pleaded not guilty for the money laundering charges leveled against him. Counsel for the EFCC, Silvanus Tahir, asked that he be remanded in the custody of the anti-graft agency. Obiano is currently on administrative bail granted him by the EFCC, which includes providing 2 sureties who are directors in civil service and also own landed properties in Abuja. The Nigerian government on Tuesday asked for the support of the United States on its membership in the G20 and a seat in the United Nations Security Council. President Bola Tinubu made the request on Tuesday at a bilateral meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, at the presidential villa in Abuja. Addressing a joint press briefing after the bilateral discussions, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuggar, said the discussions bordered on agriculture, food security, pharmaceuticals, security and artificial intelligence. Tugad argued that Nigeria, being Africa's largest economy, deserves to represent the African voice on the UN Security Council, as 60% of resolutions passed by the UNSC are Africa-related.
We noted and applauded the very important leadership of the President in other regional issues, particularly the very hard but important work of trying to return Niger to constitutional order. And we had a long discussion about that. Of course, we spent a good deal of time talking about regional security challenges. And here, Cote d'Ivoire is an essential partner. Partner for us, partner for other countries in the region that are.
And that's all on the headlines at this hour. It's now back to Dashen for the rest of the show.
All right, thank you so much, Lekon. And talking about education, today is International Day of Education. Are you grateful for education, Lekon?
Of course, education is a legacy that no one anywhere in the world would not want to be part of. It's very key when it comes to development and growth. And
it has indeed shaped who we are as
Definitely.
well. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Lekon, for the African headlines.
You're welcome.
All right, when we come back, VSA continues. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Now, if you're just joining us, this is Village Square Africa. Emphases have continuously been made on the significance of education for all people, regardless of their race, their religion, or even gender. But with the myriad of challenges faced in the education sector in Nigeria, like incessant ASUU strikes, insecurity in some regions, gender disparity, and the student loan scheme, the question of accessibility to the citizens comes to the fore. Now, this year's focus is on the idea that education can transform us by giving us the knowledge and skills to be peacemakers in our communities, thereby laying the foundation for more peaceful, fair, and sustainable societies. Now, to shed more light today on the International Day of Education, we have Amina Abubakar. She's Executive Director, FlexiSAF Foundation, Abuja, Nigeria. Hello, Amina. Thank you so much for joining me on Village Square Africa.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
All right, so just to start with, Amina, it's a pleasure to have you. What is the significance of this day, and how do you think this day revolves around the challenges being faced in Nigeria?
So I think for a country, especially like Nigeria, with a huge population of over 200 million people, we cannot overemphasize the role that education would play in making sure the country is growing as it's supposed to grow. In terms of economic development and more so sustainable development. We see a lot of challenges across the country, like you mentioned, insecurity problems and conflict issues that could have been resolved very easily if these communities were equipped with the necessary skills to be able to navigate these issues, given their broader perspective on global issues. So the role that education plays is very huge, and especially in Nigeria, where it's not given the priority it deserves. I think for the United Nations to declare a day like this for the whole globe to mark International Day for Education has been a very timely development, and then we hope that it continues to have the impact it's designed to make.
It's an important role that education plays, especially in Nigeria, Amina. But what steps do you think can be taken to enhance the quality of education in Nigeria to enable it align with global standards?
So firstly, the first step to do that is for the federal government to realize that education is worthy of their investment, because as we speak right now, we're still advocating for at least 25% of the budget to be allocated to education as recommended by UNESCO. This has not been achieved, and it's been a call that has been ongoing in the country for over a decade. So the first thing is for the government, who are the major stakeholders, to know that education deserves its investment and priority and go towards making sure it happens. The second way to achieve that is for all stakeholders to bring their heads together and work in a very coordinated front. A lot of initiatives are happening in the country, but even within the ministries, you find that there is no collaboration. There is no effective collaboration between different units. So projects are being carried out, but there is not much results within those ministries before we even go to those who are rendering services like aid. For example, the national NGOs and INGOs, UN agencies, all of these stakeholders are coming together to put their efforts, but because of this lack of coordination, you find that there is a leakage of resources, which ends up depriving a lot of other citizens the opportunity to access resources which ordinarily they would if there was proper coordination. Another thing is for us to make investments from the private sector as well. So private stakeholders can bring in not only funding, but even in terms of technical capacities to help education stakeholders achieve their goals and make sure that most citizens are getting the access that they're supposed to get. Then finally, one of the major challenges we have with access to education is the insecurity problems. So many of the stakeholders find it difficult to go to areas where there are a lot of marginalized populations who were formerly accessing education or who have never even had this access before. It's difficult to get there. So you find that a lot of other children are deprived. So strengthening our security systems to be able to afford that service to those who ordinarily do not have the opportunity would also go a long way in helping us achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is SDG, which is education for all.
Quite key, especially in the northern region. Now let's quickly talk about the theme for this year. UNESCO has actually said it is dedicated to the crucial role that education and teachers play, especially in countering hate speech, which is on social media. Now, in this era of rapid technological advancement, Amina, how can we incorporate digital literacy and 21st century skills into the curriculum to enable us prepare Nigerian students for the future?
Yes, so while it is very crucial for us to be able to compete in the global race in terms of digital education, it is also very key for us to take a step back and realize what our current realities are. In the country right now, we are talking about children not even accessing basic education, them able to read and write, and then for them to just go towards adopting digital technology, it's a bit difficult because they don't have the necessary skills for that to be sustainable. So we start with basic access first, and then we conduct thorough needs assessment for these terrains to find out what their needs are and what's sustainable for them. There's an initiative called low tech kind of intervention. The technology is there, but it's a low kind of technology so that those in marginalized settings are not overwhelmed at once. Many of them have not even had access to computers at all before. So just coming to say, okay, you need to start working with an iPad. Many of them don't feel the need for that. They just sell them off and, we're back to square one. So if we talk about sustainable development, our needs assessments need to be thorough, and then we make tailored kind of interventions. Those interventions have to be very, very context specific so that whoever it is being geared towards, it makes lasting impact. Like we mentioned earlier, Nigeria is a hugely populated country and there are different terrains. So for example, for the nomadic population, the kind of digital education you take to them has to be completely different from what you take to a child in a private school in Nigeria, for example, in a city like Abuja. So we make very thorough needs assessments, we make highly contextualized interventions, and we also build very robust monitoring and evaluation systems so that we are able to measure and continuously go back and check where we are not going in line and go back into,
all right, Amina, you did say that, gaining access to education is an issue. That's one of the concerns that you raise. But you'd agree with me that before you even gain access to education, the economic hardship in Nigeria has actually made it difficult for so many parents to be able to, fund their wards' education. Now, the federal government has actually said that it is ready to establish the Nigerian Education Loan Funds for tertiary students, especially. And this is actually designed to address the obstacles that Nigerian youngsters have in obtaining post-secondary education, owing to the lack of finances from their parents or even guardians. So how do you think that the whole economic hardship or the economic conditions in Nigeria have impacted educational infrastructure? You talked about the resources, but to what extent do we actually need the loan scheme? I really need your take and a general overview on this particular loan scheme.
So again, this very crucial intervention has its pros and cons. The pros might be that, despite the economic hardship, there are people who this can benefit greatly, especially those who we know if given this opportunity, they're going to make very good use of it. However, Nigeria is not like other countries where this has been ongoing. For example, the United States, and it's extremely structured, and it's very easy for them to monitor and make sure this continues. So, for example, in Nigeria, each government comes with its own initiative, and there's hardly any continuity. So, for the student loan scheme, many of the students say that the conditions that are put together in accessing those loans, firstly, make it very difficult for them to access it in the first place. Secondly, we know how it is very difficult for us to get into the labor market. So it's not very realistic for us to, to make this intervention at this point in time. It can be something that we can plan for in the near future when we put some systems together, like continuous economic growth, especially from amongst the youth. But right now, I feel a lot more people are not able to access this scheme because of the various challenges that are obvious in the country. Like you mentioned, poverty, and then the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy also involved in accessing this initiative.
So all right, Amina, I think there's one particular, concern that I would really love for you to actually speak on. And it has to do with gender disparity when it comes to accessing education. Considering the importance of gender equality in education, what initiatives can be undertaken to ensure equal opportunities for both the male and female gender, especially for the female gender?
So several initiatives. First of all, we need to realize, like you said, the crucial role gender parity plays in our economic development. The Global Partnership for Education estimates that with every additional year of schooling for a girl child, 10% is increased in their future incomes. So, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the World Bank says that 70% of what a woman earns goes back into developing her own society and community. So, with these very important statistics, you see that educating the girl child is directly related to economic progress, firstly. So secondly, this awareness is very important for us at community levels. Even us stakeholders need to be continuously reminded of issues like these. Then the second thing, from the community level, the parents are still struggling to send their girls to school. We still have issues like denial of opportunities, which is directly connected to gender-based violence. And also, aside denial of opportunities, they marry these girls early. So even if the girls start going to school, you find that after some time they have to drop out because they're married or they have to make a living for the family.
All right.
So Yeah.
Unfortunately, I definitely wish that we could discuss more on this, but we actually have to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Amina Abubakar, Executive Director, FlexiSAF Foundation in Abuja, Nigeria, for speaking to us at length on this particular topic.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you as well.
It was a pleasure. All right, with that, we'll take a quick break, and when we return, Village Square Africa continues. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Now, triggered by Ethiopia signing a memorandum of understanding with Somaliland earlier this month, Ethiopian National Security Advisor Ridwan Hussein has said that Addis Ababa was willing to listen to friends in a bid to de-escalate tension with Somalia over the controversial port deal with the self-declared Republic of Somaliland. Now, on Monday, he criticized meddling by opportunistic external actors in the row between Somalia and Ethiopia. The remarks were perceived as aimed at Egypt, which has warned against threats to Somalia's sovereignty. Now, the deal, if you didn't know, gives landlocked Ethiopia access to a seaport for military and commercial purposes in exchange for recognition of Somaliland as an independent state. Now, joining us to give more in-depth analysis on this particular topic, we have two gentlemen, David Matsanga, African Affairs Analyst based in Accra, Ghana, and Mukhtar Suleiman, a Policy and Public Affairs Analyst based in Abuja, Nigeria. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me on Village Square Africa.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Village Square Africa. I am not based in Accra, but I'm a visitor. I wish you invited me to Lagos. I would have come.
All right, maybe we'll do that next time. But thank you so much for joining us.
It is not my usual studios, and I am here. Thank you.
Okay, let's begin with you, Dr. Matsanga. Now, in analyzing the provision or context of this particular deal, that's the Ethiopia-Somaliland deal, what would you say are the implications of Ethiopia's recent sea access pact with Somaliland? And in what ways will this agreement impact the balance of power and influence in the region?
Thank you very much. As you are aware, most of the Africa there is no infrastructure. Most of these places, since independence, they have not even put a road, not even a single school, not even a single hospital. I have no problem at all if Ethiopia wants to develop an infrastructure, which is a network for the rest of Africa to coordinate. It is not a problem at all. I don't see any problem of one country having to say, we shall help you to have a rail line to go through your place. I think the misunderstanding has just come because Somalia, which is the main Somalia, these two countries, two nations, let's call them, the one got independence much earlier than the other. Somaliland was a different territory, and when they got independence, it was joined. So many of these African countries have those problems. But as African Union, or Organization of African Unity, we had what we call a constitutive arrangement that where we found the 1884-85 boundaries, we shall leave them as we are. We can solve these matters and without even having war. But I don't see why. Somalia has not developed that place. If you go to Somaliland and then you go to Mogadishu, I've been there several times. If you look at both of those places, I think you'd rather live in Somaliland than going to Mogadishu.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga, for that take. Now let's come back to you, Mukhtar. Now, I would also love to hear your take on this particular issue, but particularly on Somaliland's sovereignty. You know, it's not globally recognized, right? Even though it has government that actually holds elections every now and then. But then, do you think Ethiopia poses or possesses the sovereign right to recognize it as an independent state?
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here at New Center, Dashen. I think the question of sovereignty depends on how you're looking at it and where you're looking at it from. This issue of independent land being annexed is the same reason why we have a war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia. Is the same issue we international policy analysts are actually still making debates about for Taiwan and China. We still see the same issue between I'm trying to remember the other third region who is also having this same issue. In fact, currently having a similar issue between Israel and Palestine. So it's not really a new thing in the world. It's actually something that's actually been going on. But the question of sovereignty is a very debatable one, because right now the question is not about the sovereignty of Somaliland. It's about whether they are internationally recognized as an independent country. Because this country for years, since 1993, I think, when they broke out of the Somali region, they have had an independent government internally. The people who held a referendum and they agreed that they wanted to be self-governed, which every region in this country by international law actually has a right to do. So now the question whether Ethiopia has that right to get involved in the entire process, it's a question between the both countries who are actually signing the deal. Somalia is just not happy with the fact that Ethiopia is going to recognize Somaliland as an independent country internationally, because Ethiopia is a very powerful country in Africa. Let's be frank with that. And if they do recognize Somaliland as an independent country, it sort of legitimizes the entire system, which Somalia has been trying really hard not to see, trying to make sure that it doesn't see the light of day. So I think that's where the debate is. So not really,
all right,
the sovereignty of it is very debatable, actually.
Mukhtar, if you don't mind, just before we come back to you, can you mute every device around you so that we can actually hear you well, because we're getting feedback from our end.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Now, let's come back to you, Dr. Matsanga, before we move to Mukhtar. Now, Doctor, to what extent does this MOU signal, to what extent does it signal a shift in diplomatic and economic priorities, especially for Ethiopia, and then about its landlocked status? We all know about that.
My brother here has touched a lot of things. There are so many countries in Africa, including your own state. In your own country, you have a problem there, because some of these states were just put together. Some of these small countries, like Somaliland, was put together as a second thought. It was not part and parcel. Some of the territories were traded off. If you look at most of the territories were in the world were traded off. When the British said, take that one, I'll take you this. The French said, I'll give you that. The Italians gave this and I took another one. So look, there are two different things on this question of Somaliland. And I've been one of the few people who doesn't fear, who doesn't favor anybody. Ethiopia is simply developing the area which has never been developed. Surely, look at what the railway 1,000 miles away from Addis Ababa up to the port of Berbera. It will be the greatest type of infrastructure with a lot of development, with a lot of goods going down, even Somalia itself benefiting from it. I am not in this issue of saying this is my territory, therefore it must remain as poor as it is. Look at Somalia itself. Somaliland is peaceful. There are no terrorists there. The other Somalia has terrorists, full of them killing people every day. Al-Shabaab being funded by Qatar. Now you have seen one of the men who was funding Al-Shabaab has been jailed in Qatar. And we knew it. I've been telling people on this as an African, and nobody listened to me. Now today, there's a jail sentence of 20 years. He has escaped death. This was a man laundering money where we have been funded. A lot of states in Africa have those similar problems. But the point here is that Ethiopia has not said it has annexed Somalia. Ethiopia has said we need a route to the sea, and we need to develop the infrastructure. Why can't the government of Somalia in Mogadishu sit down with the the government of Ethiopia, we can resolve these problems as Africans. I don't see why we should always call
All right, Doctor, you actually did touch on, killings and Al-Shabaab. Now, I really want you to, I want to hear your take on how significant you think Somalia's assertion that the agreement and the move by Ethiopia will pose a danger to the peace in the Horn of Africa. And
where is the peace?
Yeah.
My sister, where is the peace in Mogadishu? The government in Mogadishu just lives more or less in a toilet. They have nowhere. They can't move out. Let's be honest. Where is the peace? You talk about peace. Where is the peace? Where is the peace in Somalia? Peace is only in Somalia, in places where Kenyan troops are, where my troops, Ugandan troops are. My people from Uganda are the ones guarding the peace of Somalia. There is no Somalia without those troops present. Somaliland has safeguarded itself. It has refused terrorism. It has been there. It does exist. And as an example, you can fly into Hargeisa, the capital city, enjoy your food, enjoy your drink, enjoy nightlife, and go home. You cannot enjoy nightlife in Mogadishu. So where's the peace that this guy is talking about, or whoever is talking? I am a friend of the Somali people. Most of them are my friends. We should not bring in the question of Egypt, because you know very well what Egypt is doing. Egypt has done quite a lot of mess. It's a big mess in that region.
Doctor, let me forward that question of Egypt to Mukhtar. Mukhtar, we all know that Egypt is involved in a separate dispute with Ethiopia over a major dam on the Blue Nile. Now, considering the concerns that have been raised by Egypt, saying that they do not support, the agreement between Somaliland and Ethiopia, how do you think this agreement will affect diplomatic relations and negotiations surrounding the Nile River and also the water rights?
I think the dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia has been one that's been going on for a very long time. Let's not forget that prior to now, Ethiopia has always been using the Eritrea borders for its trade, but they've not been given full access to be able to leverage the opportunity that the Nile actually presents. And that the issue of the dam has been something that's been there for eons now, and they've been having that dispute and ownership. All of this is basically what I'm just trying to say. All of this and has nothing to do with how do I put it, with the particular issue that we're actually seeing. So if you look at the Nile, for example, it constitutes for more than 12% of the world trade between Africa and Europe, and Egypt wants to have that sole control. So if Ethiopia is allowed to invest money and build infrastructures on the Nile, of course they're going to also build their own canal that would ensure for trade, and that's going to reduce the amount of trade and the amount of money that goes to Egypt. So all of this is basically resource control, and this resource control conflict has actually been on for a very long time between Ethiopia and Egypt. Egypt needs to, like the finance man actually said earlier, all of these are things that we can sit down together as Africans and decide the best way to go forward that benefits everybody, because this whole arrangement was done in a Boston Tea Party where Africa was shared like a cake, and different regions were just mashed up together, irrespective of the different cultures or background agreements that might not come together. So I think we need to rethink the structure of the way we want to see Africa, and this is why I'm always a big fan of the AfCFTA, the African Free Continental Trade Agreement. I feel like if we actually do come around to the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, it could help in alleviating some of these problems, because like I said again from the beginning, most of these things are resource-based conflicts.
All right, very interesting. Now let's hear your thoughts, Mr. Matanga, on this Ethiopia-Egypt dispute on the Blue Nile Dam.
Let's see. The 1954 agreement on the Nile comes from my country. I am very proud that we are the source of River Nile, which goes all the way to Mediterranean Sea. We had an agreement in 1954 that anything that changes the formation and the flow of River Nile, we must all agree. Here we are. 1954 is not 2024 or 2003 when the dam started filling the water. We have to change quite a lot of these are old obnoxious colonial agreements that are causing us trouble. And most of the African states have those problems. I want to tell you how. Look at you. Some people put us together when we don't want to be put together. Captain Lugard put us together. There are some countries that were put together. I don't want to say it here. It can cause you trouble, my sister. Captain Lugard put Nigeria on stock exchange today. That one country was traded in as a company. He went to Kenya. He put Kenya as a stock exchange. One country was put on. Now, if you go back to those colonial boundaries, colonial agreements, this is where the trouble is coming from. And that's why Ethiopia and Egypt are fighting over River Nile, who is filling the dam, who is not filling the dam. Let's look at that one. But Egypt and the geopolitical situation in that area, Egypt is becoming a mercenary operating country. It has divided Libya halfway in Benghazi. It supports a rebel who has controlled Benghazi. Egypt is coming down to Somalia, towards Somalia, to sending troops to Somalia. It is becoming a regional power. If you look at the corridor of Nile, Egypt is part and parcel of the problems that we now have in Sudan. Egypt is not a good mediator at all. And it should not even be brought into this situation. So for me, the colonial agreements must be looked at. We must review those colonial agreements. We must make sure that are they the ones that we can move off after 60 or 70 years of independence?
All right,
no.
Dr. Matanga. Now let's move to, just before we wrap up, let's move to Mukhtar. Now, Mukhtar, Egypt has actually come out, and they're against the MOU. Some other countries as well are against the MOU. And what people seem to talk about is the challenges that might arise from, the signing of this MOU and if it comes to, play. But are there economic benefits, that Ethiopia might actually gain from this particular MOU, especially in terms of trade routes and also regional economic integration?
Can you come again on the question? I think I didn't get the last part of the question, if you don't mind.
Okay, what I said was, are there economic benefits that Ethiopia might actually gain from this memorandum of understanding, especially when it comes to trade routes and regional economic integration?
Of course, yes. Like I said earlier, the Nile controls about 12% of the trade between Europe and Africa. I've been to the Suez Canal and I've seen firsthand the kind of cargo that actually goes through that region. And don't forget that the Suez Canal is the only two-lane man-made seaport level that actually exists in the whole world. Not even the one in France is actually as big as the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal, I think right now it should be a little bit above 12% of what they control in terms of trade. If Ethiopia is allowed to invest money into infrastructures in the Nile, of course they're going to drag that percentage with Egypt. And that is one of the things that Ethiopia wants for its economic advantage. And that's something that Egypt is not ready to let go. And then don't forget that Egypt is already having a bad blood relationship with Ethiopia from the beginning. So this sort of trying to see my enemy get more advantage, and that's what Egypt is actually trying to stop.
So you're talking about security concerns right now.
In terms of security concerns, if you notice, Ethiopia is a landlocked country, of course, in Africa, and they're looking at ensuring that they can leverage this deal with Somaliland to also get a naval base. Because at the end of the day, we are moving into a world where the bigger your military, the more your economic power. So Ethiopia is just trying to see how beyond trade, beyond having strong economies, they want to see how they can also have strong military hold, especially for their navy. So I think this sort of gives them that advantage, and that's why they're actually pushing for it, and that's why they're willing to risk even the blowback that would come from it and see how that goes. And don't forget that Ethiopia is a country that also has allies in different places. Somaliland also, even the Arab League is a bit divided in the whole issue because the Emirati have actually been investing a lot of money into ensuring that Somaliland can be habitable. There's a lot of money that has actually gone there in the past decades right now, and the country is actually developing significantly. So they are a bit skeptical. There's a bit of a division between even the Arab League about what the way forward should be, and that's also going to inform Egypt's position and Egypt's stance in the whole matter.
All right. Dr. Matsanga, can we have your final thoughts in just 1 minute?
Yes.
We're about to wrap up.
Thank you very much. I think I agree with my brother here on the question of Egypt becoming the main source of our troubles in this region. It has annexed Libya. It has given arms to over 30,000 militia standing army in South Libya. And that army is destabilizing the whole corridor. Egypt also is exporting that type of militarism into East Africa. We are aware of some geopolitical situation that is taking place where countries from Middle East, from the Gulf states, are funding terrorism in East Africa. Okay. And we're not going to keep quiet and fail to tell them. Ethiopia on this one, I don't care whether I remain alone, but on this one, I support Ethiopia. Why? Ethiopia is simply developing an area which has never been developed before. And it is not annexing Somaliland. It is building an access to the sea, which will help millions of people.
All right, well, very interesting conversation we've actually had. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking time out of your busy schedule to actually discuss the Somaliland-Ethiopia deal with me. David Matsanga, African Affairs Analyst, and Mukhtar Suleiman, Policy and Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on Village Square Africa. We'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same station on News Central. I'm Dashen Usman. Thank you so much for watching.